Another episode here of Getting There with Goz, talking about the career paths and journeys of media members, athletes, coaches, business owners, and more. Andrew Catalon, CBS's own, joining us on this episode. Really excited to learn more about his career and his path to where he is now. But Andrew, let's start at the beginning. A younger version of Andrew Catalon, 6, 7, 8 years old. What did you want to be as a kid? Where did you grow up? And did you still want to be that same thing when you're 18 years old?
Well, Tom, first off, thanks for having me on. It's great chatting with you. Finally, it's been a while since we've gotten to be able to be together. So it's good seeing you. And yeah, I think I'm one of those, and I feel fortunate, but one of those people that kind of always knew what they wanted to do. I grew up a huge Yankee fan in New Jersey. I remember reading the box scores in the newspaper every morning before going off to school. And that was kind of my thing as a kid. And it just kind of materialized from there to high school, where I would announce the PA for basketball and whatever I could do PA wise or anything at all in this medium I wanted to do. And I was lucky to know that at an early age.
So the eventual stop in college is Syracuse, and it's not Newhouse, though. Why did you select Syracuse? And was it not exactly year one you being an actual Newhouse student?
Yeah, that's actually true. I mean, Syracuse, I always knew had the great reputation for broadcasting, and it was a place that I knew I wanted to go to for a while. But when I applied there, I didn't get into the Newhouse school. I got put in the speech communications program, which ended up being my minor. And then after 1 year in that program, getting the grades up, I was able to move into Newhouse. So, it wasn't a tough decision. I mean, when I didn't get accepted to Newhouse, I thought about, maybe I'll look somewhere else. But I always wanted to go to Syracuse, and I was confident that I would do well my freshman year, which I did, and was able to move into the program after that.
The unique part about this is that we've touched on so many different people's careers who also attended Syracuse and were Newhouse students, where they talk about that first day where they show up and the competition's right in front of you. Everybody wants to be the next play-by-play or sports talk or journalist or TV anchor, and they're all there and you're all competing. You got to clear to get on the air. Was it different for you? Did you have to go through that process your sophomore year? Did you still have that, wow, there's a lot of competition in front of me? What's kind of different between sophomore and freshman year with your path through your Syracuse career?
Not too much. I mean, I still was able to get with WAER, the radio station there, where I really learned so much and shaped me for who I am still to this day. So I was in with the radio station at Syracuse right off the bat in my freshman year. And, there were some classes that I didn't take maybe freshman year that I ended up catching up with sophomore year. But, you're right. You see that competition right away at Syracuse, and there's so many good programs around the country. But, I think you have to want that in this business. You have to have thick skin, and you have to know that it's going to be competitive. And I certainly learned that right off the bat at Syracuse.
So at this point, you kind of have an idea. Maybe do you want to go television? Do you want to do play-by-play? What is kind of the path you're hoping that through these years at Syracuse? All right, I think this might be the more center-focused career path I want to follow post-graduation.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was all play-by-play in college for the most part. Being at the radio station and doing football, basketball, and lacrosse and traveling all around. I have some incredible memories from that. And heading into my senior year, I really thought that would be the way I would go. But I did a television internship at WTVH in Syracuse during my senior year and really fell in love with the local television aspect about being in one market. And kind of establishing yourself there. So really my senior year, I flipped from play-by-play to more doing anchoring and local TV. And it turns out that was my first job. In fact, my first two jobs out of college were in local TV.
All right, so let's talk about it. Right out of college, you nailed the job, which is so difficult for some people to get some type of path or some type of entry level. But you graduate. Is it Vermont is the first stop for you?
Yeah, it was really crazy how it worked out. I mean, the spring of your senior year, you start putting your resume reel together, and then you just send out. Back in the day, you send out VHS tapes. That's the day that I. And I sent one to Vermont. That was the only one I sent, and I just figured I would be home that summer, back in New Jersey with my family, and just kind of be looking for a job. And that one tape, amazingly, I got offered the job. I never went there. I just accepted it on the phone. And 2 weeks after I graduated, threw a bunch of stuff in a car and drove up to Vermont, where I'd never been. for the first time. So it was absolutely wild how it all came together. And I started working a couple weeks after I graduated.
So what was the day in the life for you? What teams were you covering, and what was it like lifestyle wise? Because when you're 22, 23, the world in television is not exactly one that would be favorable to someone in their early 20s, let's just say, especially when it comes to the social aspect.
Yeah, well, Burlington was great. I really miss it up there, to be honest with you. I mean, I was right out of college, and there's a bunch of colleges, including UVM, right there. So a lot of the people that I would socialize with or see out were people my age. So it was actually a really fun time to be there. And I covered everything from high school sports to Vermont basketball, which took me on a couple of fun rides as they made the NCAA tournament under Tom Brennan, TJ Sorrentine, all those really good teams.
Hey, whoa, I got to stop you, Andrew. You're a Syracuse guy. What are you talking about?
I wasn't there when they beat Syracuse, so I didn't enjoy that ride as much. It was the first time they went to the tournament when I was still there. So I loved it. I mean, I shot everything on the camera, wrote everything, edited everything, did it all. It was, that in that market, you do everything. And, I remember a teacher telling me at Syracuse, you got to make your first 1,000 mistakes before, you're successful. And, whether it was an interview that I didn't shoot well or, getting a score wrong, whatever, it was a great place to learn. The community was awesome. And I really loved my 2.5 years there before the station actually shut down. We had a meeting on a Tuesday, and they said that on Friday we're all out of jobs, and that's how I lost my job there. The station was losing money, and they wanted to run The Simpsons at 6 o'clock instead of the news anymore, and that's how we all found out 3 days before.
The power of Marge and Homer and Bart took you guys out. But even though, now we can look back and we can laugh and say they decided to pick that show over local news coverage. But when you're early in your career, there's got to be a sense of fear, like, whoa, what is the future going to be if I'm getting taken out? I've been doing everything right. And they feel like this format is not successful enough for them to continue doing it.
Yeah, I remember calling my dad in the parking lot and just saying, hey, we all lost our jobs, and what do I do now? And it was crazy because, you think you're doing the right thing, and well, where do you pivot? Where do you go? And that's why I can really sympathize with people who lost their jobs, because you have that feeling of, well, now what? And I've been doing this whole time. So where do I go now? So it was crazy how it worked out. I was out of a job for 2 months, and then I got an offer from the job in Albany, where I ended up being for over 10 years. So it turned out to be a blessing. The Albany job was a much better job than I could have hoped for in the situation that I was coming from.
Well, after you lose your job and you get this opportunity in Albany, I'm sure during that process, there might have been a lot more added individual pressure on yourself to say, you know what, I need this. Like, if I want to continue doing my career, there is some internal pressure. They got to nail this. What was that interview process like, and who did you talk to when you went through that process?
Well, I mean, in Albany, I heard the job come open, and then, hundreds of people will apply for these jobs, and they still do. I mean, everyone wants to kind of be in sports, and if you get there, you don't want to give it up. So really, a teacher I had in Syracuse, his name was Dow Smith. He knew the news director in Vermont to help me get that job, and he knew the news director in Albany at WNYT, who at the time was Paul Conti, and that kind of helped me get an interview. And I remember going down to Albany and walking into the office and sitting with Paul, the news director, and Roger Weiland, who, as we know, is still there. And, I didn't get a good feel. I got a good feeling with Roger. I didn't have a great feeling with Paul. And I remember leaving thinking, I don't know how this is going to go. And then I heard from Roger, and things went from there. And very lucky to have gotten that job really so close to after I lost my job in Vermont, because then who knows, as time goes on, your reel gets older. To get it that quick was a big key for me.
So we're looking at timeline now here, like middle 2000 era in the Capital Region. What teams are you covering, and what were some of your favorite experiences during your time here in the 518?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it was always the summer was the best because of Saratoga and then the Giants having training camp there. I mean, I had some great trips with Siena basketball. Roger's beat was more Albany, and I was with Siena, and it was a great time as they went to the NCAA tournament all those times. But to me, I always think back to the summer, and it was like, waking up early, going to Giants training camp, eating the free food in the cafeteria for lunch, and then blasting up to Saratoga for a feature race. The summer was busy, but it was so much fun, and I loved that time of year in Albany.
So this part of this conversation, I have to fully admit, it's always been hearsay for me because I see a guy from the Capital Region doing great things on CBS Sports, and I'm like, how did Andrew Catalon get to CBS? Now, I've heard it from other people, and for years, I've been willing and excited to ask you this question. Now I get to. I've heard there's some rumor involving some random event up north that's not a traditional sport. Is there truth to this story? Take us through how in the world this path starts towards you and CBS.
It is. You're right. You did some homework here, Tom. I'm very impressed by your research here. I mean, so I did the play-by-play in college, and then I still kept my toe in the water in Albany when I could, working for Time Warner, calling a soccer game, or I remember doing a Union RPI football game, which was really cool, on the top of a fraternity house at Union College, broadcast booth. So, I still did it here and there. But then, there was a phone call to the sports department in Albany. Gosh, it must have been 2005 or 6. And it was a production house in Saratoga, Carr Hughes Productions. And they were doing a lot of winter sports Olympic events out of their production house in Saratoga. And they were supposed to do a curling event the next morning. And whoever the announcer was had trouble getting in because of weather, couldn't fly in. It was a winter time. And they said, look, we need someone to come down here, or come up here in this case, and just kind of be traffic cop, and be the play-by-play. We have to voice this event in the morning, and our play-by-play announcer is not there. Would you be interested in doing it? And I said, well, I would, but I don't know what curling is. I wouldn't know the first rule. I wouldn't know anything about it. And I said, don't worry about it. We just need you to kind of get in, get out of commercials, and tee up the analyst, and just keep it smooth. And I said, I could try to do that. So they were desperate, and I said yes. And I ended up doing a lot of events, long story short, for this production company, which got in with NBC. They were doing a lot of events for NBC. And then NBC went to them and said, hey, we're looking for a new curling voice for, upcoming Olympics. Do you have anybody? And they said, well, we've been working with him. That's me. And it kind of went from there. And that kind of really spun me back into play-by-play. Not that I stopped working at Channel 13, but I felt the juices again for play-by-play, to be at events, call live events. I missed doing that. And this was an opportunity to do a lot more of it. So getting in with NBC and doing the Olympics really kind of caught the eye of CBS. And that's how I really ended up doing what I'm doing now, is really by answering that phone call and saying, yeah, I'll come up in the morning to Saratoga to call an event I've never heard of.
This is more insane hearing it from you. I can't believe this. Even like hearing it now from you. Okay, I got to do a few follow-ups, because even hearing that, let's go back to the actual broadcast itself for curling. You said that you didn't know much about the sport, and rightfully so. It's not one of the traditional sports here in America that fans are totally passionate about. Was it fear or was it excitement? Because sometimes even, look, sure, there might be pressure on you in a lot of broadcasts, but I think maybe the mindset was, let's have fun with this. And if it works out, it works out. You didn't really have a thought of, I hope I'm the next curling voice. What was your mindset going into the broadcast? And how would you grade it going back and listening to it?
Well, I mean, I think in that situation, I could tell this company was desperate. They needed somebody. And to me, I was looking at it as a way to make a couple $100 for showing up the next morning. So I didn't feel any pressure. They knew that I didn't know anything about it. Of course, I wanted to do a good job. Anything you put your name or your voice to, you want it to be, well. But the advice I got was like, look, you're doing this for an audience that doesn't know curling necessarily either. Certainly, the general American sports fan doesn't know much about it. So if you have questions in your head, just ask them to the analyst. Why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? What do you think of this? So that was kind of the way I approached it. I almost approached it as someone who didn't know anything about it, because I didn't. And that kind of made the broadcast go, and just getting in and out of commercial break is something you know how to do from doing this the whole time. So, I didn't feel pressure. I just kind of went up there thinking I'll make a couple $100 and I'll be back to work in a couple hours. And that's exactly the way I approached it.
In between this event and the Olympics, are there like regional curling events you're doing for like NBC Sports Network or some type of regional networks that you're kind of building your way up towards that?
Yeah. So the first thing I ended up doing for NBC was a curling exhibition in Rockefeller Center. which was actually really cool. It was right on the ice at Rockefeller Center, and NBC used me because of the relationship they had with this production company, Carr Hughes, who I ended up working more events for after this initial one. I remember I did a whole winter of luge every Sunday morning at like 6 a.m. I would sign off the air at WNYT at midnight on Saturday. I'd get up at 6 a.m. Sunday morning, call luge off a monitor from Austria till noon, go home, take a shower, and then go anchor the 6 o'clock news at Channel 13. So I did that for a whole winter. So I did some events with them, then the exhibition at Rockefeller Center, and then NBC offered me to do the 2008 Olympics, which were in Beijing, but I did them from New York City. I called a sport called team handball. And that, to me, was kind of my trial run with NBC to maybe do curling in the upcoming Olympics, which I did. Ended up doing 5 Olympic Games for NBC. So it's something I'm proud of. And really, a lot of it is owed to Carr Hughes Productions in Saratoga.
All right, so 2 other things there. I'm glad you clarified one of them already. Some probably heard that and thought, wait a second, did this guy, Andrew Catalon, give up his job at NBC 13 to call curling? I'm glad you clarified that it was almost a freelance. Roger here locally, people know this as well. He does play-by-play. So you were still with 13. I'm glad you clarified that because people would have been like, there's no way he was that wild and quit his job for the curling thing. Okay, that's good to clarify there. And the second part about NBC, you mentioned the Olympics right there. You called it from the city. So you never went to any actual in-person Olympics, or did one you get the opportunity to go to?
So 3 of the 5 Olympics I did, I was on location. I went to Vancouver for curling. I went to London for tennis, which was at Wimbledon, which was really cool. And I went to Russia, Sochi, for curling. And then for Beijing, I did team handball from New York City. And for Rio, the last one I did in 2016, I did tennis from their facility in Connecticut.
So things are great. Look, you've got a job in Albany. You're calling the Olympics for NBC with these incredible sports. Things, honestly, you could basically retire at that point, Andrew Catalon, and say, I did everything I wanted. That's a pretty amazing career. So, and then this part gets a little tricky. I always tell people this because this is your current employer. How did CBS initially reach out? Who was it? And you can share as little or as much as you want because you technically, you still do work for CBS at this point.
Well, sure. And I think, the bigger thing, if people are watching, and obviously the title is Getting There with Gaz, I think getting there was my willingness to say yes to anything and everything. It could have been, I could have very easily said curling. No, I don't want to do that. Or Sunday mornings luge from Europe. Why do I want to? I just always said yes, and I think that really served me well because I think in this business a lot of people don't want to work with people who are difficult to work with, right? And your willingness to show up early in the morning or say yes to an assignment, that is important to me. It served me well, and I think that's the lesson for anyone watching who wants to get in this business is to just always say yes. But to your question about CBS, when I started doing the Olympics for NBC, it became clear that I needed to have an agent. And and the person I ended up signing with, who I'm still with to this day, so it's been over a decade, was the one who kind of opened the door for me at CBS. And the first thing I ever did for CBS was the U.S. Open tennis in 2010 in 3D. Because HD was there and made it, and we're still there. But then everyone thought 3D would kind of be the next wave. Turned out it really didn't become much of anything, but this was CBS's, attempt at seeing, would this work? How would this work? So I called the U.S. Open tennis in 3D. And even though it went to, 10 people, it was more of like a trial to see how it would work. They liked my work. I got in, met people there at the tennis event. And then I started getting, a few more assignments with CBS, and it turned into kind of like a part-time role, which is when I had to break away from Channel 13 to a part-time role with them because there was just too much that I didn't want to turn down. And then eventually full-time role to this point where I'm at today.
And credit to your talent and your success because you turned that part-time role into where you are now, as you just mentioned, and that adds to responsibilities of not just tennis, but college basketball in the elite club, as I like to call it, the NFL broadcast teams on a Sunday. What came first? I'm guessing it was college basketball and worked your way up because of the NFL and everything else, but take us through that timeline of how those jobs start to get added to your responsibilities.
Sure. So the first thing was tennis in 2010. And then a couple months after that, the CBS asked me to come down to New York City and have a meeting to talk about golf and what I knew about golf and had I ever called golf, which the answer was no. But they wanted to kind of test my knowledge out. And they asked me a bunch of questions about this golfer, this course, and I was a golf fan. So to me, it was like, great, I'm talking about golf. But it was because they wanted me to go to the Masters with them in 2011 to be one of the digital announcers for their feature group platform. So I didn't really understand at the time why they were asking me all this, but it turned out that they trusted my knowledge. They trusted what I had done. And so it worked out that the next event I did was the Masters in 2011 for the feature group coverage. And then when that, went well, then it started opening up other doors. What other sports do you do? Well, I've called some preseason NFL football. Okay, well, we'll keep that in mind if we have an NFL game come up, which they did. Later in 2011, I filled in on a game. So it just kind of snowballed from there. And, when you get these opportunities, another lesson, you gotta knock them out of the park, and you gotta step up to the plate. And, it's easier said than done, but I kind of knew my mentality was, if I don't do well on these opportunities, they're going to go to somebody else. So that was the pressure I put on myself to every time I got an opportunity with them to make the most of it. And thankfully I did. And they started giving me some, as you pointed out, some college basketball in 2012. And that led to college football in 2013. And then I became a regular member of the NFL roster. My first full season was 2014. So yeah, ever since that US Open tennis, my first opening with them, it's been a great relationship. I love working for CBS. They're tremendous people. I really feel like a family there. And I've been very, very fortunate and lucky to get all these assignments that I've had.
And you just heard that lineup. The Masters, March Madness, the NFL, college football. These are the dream scenarios for just one field of that. Might be good enough for a broadcaster. Hey, I did the Masters. I'll do that for the rest of my career. I'm good. You get to do 4 of those and all the Olympics and everything else. It's truly an amazing career, and you've got so many more years ahead of you. I got a few more questions here for you. Bottom left corner, because you do so many different sports, advice for someone prepping for a broadcast. First for you, how does Andrew Catalon do it? And what would be your advice for people prepping for a broadcast?
Yeah, I think each sport is different, and I approach them, in a different format. I'd say football takes the most amount of time. I still handwrite all of my boards, my notes, which is time consuming, and a lot of people just type it into a computer, and that's great. But I feel like I retain it much better when I handwrite it down. So I think that's one of the big decisions you have to make when you prep for an event. How are you going to put all your information together? I certainly think reading newspaper clippings or internet articles or keeping up to date with, what's happening with a particular team or player, if you will, is very important. And then, typically you do get meetings with NFL team every week. I'll talk to both teams, or college basketball. I'll talk with the coach at shoot around. And I always find that those notes are very important to get into the broadcast because nobody else has them. I mean, you could read the preview in the local newspaper the morning of, but everybody could do that. Not everybody gets a chance to meet with the players or the coaches like we do. So I always try to incorporate those notes. I write them in red on my board because I know that they're important and something to get in. So, there's a long way you can go about preparing, but to me, you can never over prepare. I mean, I think it's always good to know as much as you can and be up to date on everything.
This is a compliment, this next question. It feels like when you went more nationally known, when you move away from the regional to statewide, it was because of the Jacksonville Jaguar fans, and I think you know what I'm talking about. Again, you are a national broadcaster, but take us through, for those that don't know, what is the love for you in Jacksonville like?
That's funny. I mean, I think in my career, I've either called Jacksonville the most, or Tennessee is right up there too. It's one of those two teams. And clearly, a lot of the times I did the Jaguars, they were not having good years. But there was one year, the year they went to the playoffs, where, I think that there was a couple of wild finishes, and I was on the call, and they look. I loved going down there. Gus Bradley was the coach. Blake Bortles was the quarterback. These weren't great teams, but then you could see as they were with Doug Marrone coming on board, they were growing, and there were some exciting finishes. And I kind of see myself as like, I don't care if you're 0-16. If there's an exciting play, it's exciting. I mean, it's sports, it's entertainment. So yeah, you could be having a losing season, but if you throw a 50-yard touchdown, I'm going to get pretty excited. So I don't know. I think maybe the Jaguars fans have got used to hearing me scream. They certainly got used to me calling their games because I've done so many of them, and I think maybe in a way it became like a good luck charm for them. But they've moved on now. I've caught a couple losses now, and I'll hear it the other way. Like, we got to get somebody else in there. So it comes and goes.
Trevor Lawrence is there now, so maybe they'll call you back. We need Andrew Catalon. We need some help here for the big guy with the long hair. But it goes
whoever they win with.
Yes, you and Trevor Lawrence is who they're going to win with, and Urban Meyer. You can rank the importance however you want in that. But I bring that point up because, like, now that you're doing the national broadcast, it seems for your fellow play-by-play broadcasters, you guys get heat from local markets because you guys are not local broadcasters. And I think that the sense of maybe a local radio crew or a TV crew might be more biased towards that certain team, but you guys try to call it down the middle. Is that a true thing where national broadcasters may fear or may feel more heat than any other type of broadcaster?
Yeah, I would say that it's always interesting after a game to look on my Twitter account, and I have half the people saying I hate this team and the other half saying I hate the other team, which to me means I did a good job because they all think I hate them. It comes with the territory. I can honestly say the only thing I ever root for in a game is a close game. I mean, that's all that anyone wants, is to have a fun finish and a good game. I've never gone into a game thinking, even when I've called Syracuse basketball, I can tell you that I sat down in the chair and I wasn't rooting for Syracuse. I mean, was it special to me to call my alma mater? Of course it was. Did I want them to beat the other team? So that was influencing my call? Not even close. I mean, I really think that's overrated. Now, if you're, a local team announcer, you're going to, if you're the Yankee announcer, you probably want to see the Yankees win. But in our position, I don't root for anybody, really.
I know that's so true for you because personally, I love your college basketball calls because when we get to March Madness time, and I remember I texted you a couple of months ago, I'm like, hey, I know you're busy right now, but I just want to say how great your call was the other day. It feels like college basketball and your personality match so well because of what you just said. When those close games happen, you want someone like you on the call because you can feel the emotion. Do you love March Madness in particular as your favorite sporting event because it fits your style of broadcasting?
They're all great. I mean, I feel lucky to do all the assignments I have that you mentioned before. Certainly, growing up watching March Madness is a dream to call that. And I always think that an important lesson for people who want to be in play-by-play is you have to nail the big moments. If you have a really good broadcast, but then that buzzer beater comes and you come up flat or you don't nail it, that's what people are going to remember about the broadcast, not the first, 39 minutes. So, I always, not that I focus anymore in those moments, but I feel like those are the moments you have to really rise up and sometimes you don't. Sometimes, you miss it or you don't get it. But I think that the more times you nail it in that moment, the better, the better you'll be, thought of in those moments. And that's something that I continue to strive for.
Yeah, especially with those buzzer beaters, depending on how legendary they get, the clip will be played over and over again, whether it's people like Gus Johnson or others that a certain buzzer beater goes in and that clip sticks with them for a long time. One more question before I let you go because you're super busy. You got a lot of great things happening. You mentioned it already. The podcast is called Getting There with Gaz. Best advice for young students, young broadcasters to get where you are, where Andrew Catalon is now, the best advice you can offer. I know you've offered some throughout the podcast. Just a few more things to help out everybody looking to get to where you are in your career.
Yeah, I would say I've mentioned a couple of them already, but I would say the big ones are always say yes, do any assignment, even if you think in a million years, why would this ever help me? You just never know. And the other thing, and I know this is corny and somewhat cliched, but you got to be nice. People want to work with nice people. They don't want to work with jerks. and especially in this business, because there's so many people that would love to call a football game or a basketball game. And I think maybe on the surface, people think that cutthroat competitiveness is what gets you to where you want to be, but you have to lose that when you get to when you're calling game. I mean, I can tell you that people have lost jobs because they're not good people, because nobody wants to work with them. A lot of times you see a broadcast and it's like, oh, it's this announcer and this announcer, but it's really a team. And it takes those two people meshing together to make that team work. And that's something that I learned over the years. Like, I think it's very easy to think of yourself as like, okay, I'm going to announce this game, but really we are going to announce this game. And you have to have good people that want to work together to do that. So, I don't think there's a long shelf life for people in this business that don't play nice in the sandbox, if you will. I think those people get weeded out, especially in this day and age when there's so many people that want to do it. So that would be my two biggest tips. And I know that they're not anything really deep, but I think they do mean a lot in this business.
No, I think it's great tips for people who are looking to continue their path and start their path and everything else. This was long overdue. I'm very happy we finally, after years of trying to pull this off, got to talk for about a good solid half hour. Andrew Catalon, CBS. You heard all the spots where you can find him. Just put on CBS and you'll probably see his face and hear his voice. Thank you so much for doing this. And hopefully in the future, we'll do some more stories. Who knows? Maybe got a Bill Raftery story. For all the people you've worked with, who knows? We'll do maybe more stories next time you're with us too.
I would love it, guys. Thanks for having me on, and good luck to you.